Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. Sure. So I work as the visualization lead for NASA's Chandrasekhar Observatory. I am situated at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, which is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Though fortunately, I get to work from home a lot. But what Chandra does is look at the X-ray universe, essentially. So really energetic phenomena such as exploding holes, exploding stars, black holes, and colliding galaxies. So pretty exotic and cool things to look at. What I do specifically, or at least how I like to frame it, is that I use data to essentially tell stories about the universe around us. And the forms that those stories can take can be pretty diverse, from visualizing a 3D model of an exploded star to looking at composited data of a baby star to writing a tweet about a middle-aged star. Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And I guess I should maybe start at the beginning. So, when I was really young, I wanted to be, let's see, an astronaut, a botanist, a zoologist, a doctor, an environmentalist. You can probably see a recurring theme here. I really loved science. I really loved the idea of figuring out problems, answering questions, and trying to have an impact. I thought maybe, I would save the elephants or save the bees or save the planet, right? But really, the overall thread was that I really liked learning, and I really liked learning about many different kinds of things. And science gave me a place to sort of comfortably settle. So I went to the University of Rhode Island to study biology, and I started getting specialized at the very small. So I was studying things like spirochetes, which are essentially bacteria that you can get from, say, parasites. So things like Lyme disease. So I found it interesting, but I realized I didn't want to do that traditional straight path of undergrad, grad school, PhD program, postdoc, tenure track researcher, professor. Like I wanted to sink my teeth into the work right then. So I transitioned myself into computer science, and I had a great mentor at my university that helped me do that. And when I realized that I could use computer science to look at a number of different problems, no matter the scale, I could find patterns in the data. There was a lot of data to work with, so there are always new problems to figure out. It was kind of my happy place, right? So that issue that I had when I was younger, what do I want to be when I grow up, wasn't really an issue at all. And I think that's something that I realized, we don't have to know what we want to be when we grow up. At the United States of Women Summit, where I first met you, First Lady Michelle Obama actually talked about that exact thing, that we should all be changing, challenging ourselves, continuing to prove. So there isn't just one set end goal. There isn't just a linear path, but that we can diverge and move and segue. And that when you think about it, we really shouldn't encourage kids to be acting towards such a linear path either. So that's a really long answer. Right, it did. And I've always I've always put more pressure on myself. I've never been competitive with other people necessarily, but with myself, I'm very competitive. So this ideal that I had set for myself, that I would grow up to be some, top-notch zoologist saving the elephants, when it didn't happen, when I started focusing on data, I was worried that I was essentially, treading back on my own values, right? So I had to reframe how I looked at things. And it took me a long time to really figure that out. I mean, I wasn't sure when I made the switch how I could have an impact. And that was really one of my life goals. Like, I wanted to make sure what I was doing mattered, right? And I think it took me a while to figure out how to do that. I spent the first 6 to 7 years of my career working on a NASA mission focused very inward. I was learning a lot. I had to learn new languages. I had to learn new skill sets. I had to learn very specific things about very specific sciences. And that felt kind of selfish, but it was a necessary step. And then I think it wasn't until I became a mother that I started to think, all right, I want to start looking more outward, right? And that probably sounds a little ironic when you think about astronomy and the universe is nothing but outward, right? But when you're working on a computer program for that, it doesn't feel very outward. It feels very sort of isolating. So after I became a mom and I realized that I needed to work more on the people and less on the data, it was kind of a shock to me that I'd spent so much of my career not doing that already, that whole goal I'd set up for myself. So, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's certainly, it's something that I placed on myself, right? I mean, I don't think people would look at me as a worker and say, oh, she's so selfish because she's taking classes and working in grad school and taking seminars for fun. But to myself, it felt selfish because I was investing in myself and I wasn't ready to admit that it was a necessary step, right? So I can't do what I do today if I hadn't put that time into myself, but yet I still felt guilty doing it, right? I mean, it's the usual catch 22, I suppose, of that ideal that a lot of women, at least of my age, had of what we were expected to do and what was a necessary step. But as a mom, I think it started opening me up, that I realized that it was such an important step of who I became. And it prepared me to then be able to put a better focus and more energies on these outwardly facing programs that I couldn't have done any other way. So now this universe that we all share, we all look at it from our own perspective, right? It's not just black and white data, cold and sterile. So working on programs that are outwardly facing are really important, helping girls get interested in science and computer science, making it about the who and less about the what. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So, oops, hold on. My earbud fell out. So, one of my top 5 personality traits is responsibility. So, all the work that I approach, I have this aspect of my work is funded by taxpayers. It's something that should be accessible to everyone. This is an important shared resource. that needs to be communicated beyond just the small, ivory towers or what have you. So my colleagues and I created a program. It was in honor of the International Year of Astronomy back in 2009. And the program was essentially to create exhibits in public spaces. So people didn't have to seek out that science, which most of them probably helped pay for in some way, but people could encounter that information, those perspectives anywhere, at the bus stop, on a train, at an airport, in a public park, at a hospital, in a prison. I mean, you get the idea. It was about breaking it out of those walls of whether that's, an academic institution or a museum, something free and accessible. And we had about 1,000 different sites that the materials were shown at. So we were really happy with how it came out. Yeah. Oh no. Sure. Okay. So there are some technical difficulties apparently with this discussion, and we are going to, I will reiterate all the questions and repeat them so the audience can hear everything, and then later on we'll do a nice job patching up the text and the actual audio. So the question is, how do we get more girls and women in STEM, and where is the bottleneck, and what can we do to help work on this issue? And I think that's a really great question. It connects actually to what I was talking about earlier with the inward versus outward focus. As a woman in computer science, working in astronomy, those are two pretty male dominated fields. And again, I think it took me a while to gain the experience to even know what to do about that, or to even realize, that it was still an issue in 2015, and not 1998, just when I started out. So one of the programs that we work on is essentially showing that these programs can give you some insight into real careers. So providing authentic career experiences, and not just say setting up a coding exercise to code, but to show some endpoint that, if you learn how to work on compositing data, for example, that can apply to astronomy, like me, but it can also apply to molecular biology, molecular imaging, medical imaging, and a host of other fields. So it's this idea that computer science as a general literacy skill will provide you as a way of thinking, and then specific computer science skills can then also help you become placeable in certain careers. So I like trying to provide both. So this question is more about how do you focus more on the work versus focusing on the position, and is there a benefit to doing one versus the other? Um, I would agree that my specific career trajectory has focused more about how do you fit these computer science skills into a very specific area, and how do you research how other people understand that data, which I think is an important part that's often missing through any type of computer science, especially the type that I work in, that's more data visualization, that it's not just about a single end product, but it's also about understanding how people figure out, comprehend, and receive that information, and how they sort of ingest it into their own experiences, habitat, and self, right? So for me, it's always been a simple stream of going from one to the other. But I also had the type of job that let me do that, that let me move my career trajectory smoothly along that path. And I don't know how common that really is. So I don't know how universal my experience is, but from my own point, I can just say that it's made me a really stronger person, both work-wise, but also just in general, like my brain, right? It helps me think differently and connect things that I don't think I would have been able to do otherwise if I hadn't approached my work that way, from the content versus just the platforms, if that answers your question. Oh, the phone call just kicked out, so now I can't hear you. Hold on, quick dial back. Hello. Okay. So, all right. So, yeah. All right. So the question is essentially burnout and sustainability, and there's a lot of components to that question. Essentially, I think first it's the issue of work-life balance, right? Which I don't really believe in. I don't believe in that as a concept. I think you have to let some things slide while you focus on a specific area, and then you can pick up other areas of your life later on when you have time to return to those again. But having a true work-life balance to me is kind of a false prince. But as far as sustainability and burnout specifically, one is getting yourself into a situation where it's not that your job has to be flexible, but the people around you need to be flexible, right? So if you need to, for example, take maternity leave, do you have a support system around you to help get through that? Or, if you are taking too much on, are there people that can help you pick up some of the work or support you as you're going through that? And I've been, I think, very lucky to land in a place where my supervisor was very supportive, my coworkers are very supportive, my whole team is, for the most part, really supportive. And I can't imagine doing what I do without that kind of network. That whole "it takes a village to raise a child." Well, I think it takes a village just to be a worker. I mean, it's it's really not done in isolation. But that's not to say that I don't still go through periods of complete burnout. I mean, the challenge with my job would be, well, the benefit of my job is that I learn something new every day. Every single day, I learn something new. And that's exciting, but it's also a challenge to the job because that's a lot of information to be taking in, processing, analyzing, outputting in some way. So it also kind of encourages my puppy-like attention span, right? It's like, here, over here, play with me. Oh, new toy. Oh, squirrel, right? So when you have a job that's very information intensive like that, the burnout can be pretty strong. But what I found is if you have that supportive network underneath you, around you, above you, that if you do need to slide for a couple months and go a little more introverted, you can. Right. Yeah, I let go of the guilt of that long ago. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Sure. So this last question is essentially about my co-author Megan Watsky and myself, how we write books together and supporting each other. And I would say, again, that's a perfect segue from the last question because I work with Megan for my day job. And so we are a support network for each other, in addition to our supervisors and our team in general. So we found that we worked really well together. I can provide a sort of a specific visualized picture, and she can provide a more general overview picture. And together, it's really easy for us to figure something out, write it up, and work it through. So we started writing books together. Actually, the first book was inspired from the project we did for the International Year of Astronomy. And we've written two more after that, and we're working on another one now. And I say having a co-author in another time zone is probably one of the best ideas ever. We're both working moms, so we can toss each other things at different times of the day, and it just works. It totally works. But we're all about trying to make science accessible. So how do you take, deep space astrophysics and make that a little bit more relatable? And I think that's the interesting way that we're able to frame our writing and the images that we use to support it and the metaphors that we can use. And we sort of play off each other with that really well. So it's a really fun thing to do on the side. Oh, they're for anyone. We wrote our first book with the idea that you did not need to know anything about astronomy. It's called Your Ticket to the Universe, and it's really for anyone. It's meant to be accessible. If you're a beginner, great. If you're a more advanced amateur astronomer, even you will find something in it. It's meant to be fun. Our other book that we did together that's called Light, that is kind of like a part two in a sense that it gets a little bit deeper into some of these other physics concepts. And our third book that we wrote with Dr. Travis Rector is kind of a specific look on how we actually make images of the universe. Sure. So my advice for women who are interested in going in STEM fields at all would be general advice would be to keep your minds open and realize that deviating from that straight path is okay. Think big, think wide, think deep, whatever way you think, just keep thinking and learning and doing. But the specific piece I would recommend is to take some computer science classes. or take a MOOC, or pick up a coding book or an app. You know, it's not just about the placeable skills. It's really about adding to your overall literacy and opening your mind to another way of thinking. You know, it's a true added bonus in a world like today that's so technology based. And as far as culture, that's a tougher question because there is still a lot that's bro culture. I mean, I can still be the only woman in the room sometimes, and it's, what year is it? 2016. You know, that's a little bit harder, but I think if you surround yourself again with people that really believe in you, you can let it fall to the side. And the one specific weird thing I would say is don't stop wearing bright colors and floral prints. Like, don't be afraid of that, because that's something that I actually did for a while. I kind of changed my wardrobe to be a little more dull because I wanted to fit in, I think. But now I'm like over 40 and I'm like, meh, if I want to wear a floral dress, I'll wear a floral dress. So okay. Sure. So my last words, if you're interested in finding out more about me, I do love Twitter. I'm at Kimberly Cowell. I'm also on Instagram, same username. Oh, and Snapchat, I'm Kimberly Arcand. And I'm highly addicted to Snapchat, by the way, so I'd love some new friends. But I would say that if you can find a job where you're learning something new all the time, where you're not afraid that this is what you need to be when you grow up, that you can pick up the stuff around the way that you need and not feel guilty about investing in yourself, that I think are the keys to having a sort of healthy work ethic. Thanks. Great. Great. All right, so you can all follow along at hashtag Career Crush, and Emily will be posting more on the blog and elsewhere very soon. Thanks. Bye.